All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name is Hat,
And I'm Eric.
and today we have absolutely very little news to talk about. So
A dry week.
we're gonna be hitting the mailbag here and catching up on some stuff that we've missed on our Discord server, and then also in YouTube comments, and just kind of trying to hit everything that we can. So this is going to be a free for all. If you're joining us in the live stream at any time, please feel free to ask us questions as well. But without further ado, let's get into our normal segment. Eric, what have you been playing this week?
I have been playing a classic since Capcom has been coming back. I've been in a little Capcom craze lately, and I decided to go back and play Breath of Fire 4 again.
Nice.
Which, just to put it plainly, it is I have a hard time deciding if 3 or 4 is the best Breath of Fire. But man, Breath of Fire 4 is a really, really damn good RPG. Like, probably one of the top 10 easily for PS1 RPG.
Here's what I'll say. I played Breath of Fire 1 and 2, and I felt like those were not particularly great RPGs. I didn't think they were terrible. I just was like, this is like very predictable. Very like the plot was very like I saw all the twists from coming from a mile away. I didn't particularly like it, and that kind of like tainted me towards 3 and 4. So I've seen a lot about 4. I think I've gotten some hands on, like just at like a friend's house, but I haven't really sat down and given it some attention. But from what I hear, it's one of the better ones.
Yeah, it's I mean, as someone who personally likes 2, I did enjoy that game, but 3 and 4 definitely did a lot of things to improve upon the formula. Um, it's basically taking what worked in those games and they just like ramped it up. The sprite animation for the PS1 games are just like, I feel like they're masterfully done. 4 I think hit the pinnacle of that. If you just look at the sprite animation works on that, I mean, it is not cheaply done. It's like these were like finely crafted sprites that that have unique animations for unique moments. So it's not like they repeat a lot of their previous sprites. It's like it feels like they know how to make the character react to a certain scene, rather good or bad. The battle system is very basic. It's you got your attacks, you got your magic. You can combo attacks and magic together to do more damage, or you can use the main character Ryu, or whatever you decide to call him. He's a silent protagonist. He can transform into a dragon form and use abilities of the dragon form that are really powerful, but they cost a lot of your AP, which is like the MP of this game. So you have to be careful how you decide to use it, especially later in the game.
Sure.
Story wise, for Breath of Fire 4, it's basic. It's actually interesting. It's actually 2 separate stories. While you are Ryu the majority of the game, you are also another character that's on the other side of the world with his story that pops in occasionally, named Falu, who was the first emperor of the empire that's currently reigning over the most of the world right now. And for mysterious reasons, people of that empire who currently um, own the empire or like run it want him dead because they don't want him running the show anymore. So you have these 2 separate stories of these 2 characters. While, like I said, Ryu is the majority of it. It's kind of like Final Fantasy VIII, where you occasionally go to a Laguna scene and control him. It's a lot like that.
Right.
But you figure out why later in the game, why Ryu and Fao Lu are 2 integral characters to the story. So there's a lot of mystery and intrigue there. But the story wise on Ryu's side is that he is a dragon that was formed into a human, and Nina, the Princess of Windia, who's out to find her sister who disappeared and went on a pilgrimage. So she's out to find her and find out why she's on that said journey, which turns into bigger events in the game.
Hmm.
So it does have a very simple start out, and when she finds Ryu, she is she welcomes him along, kind of like I'm a lost person, I don't know where to go type of deal, and she takes
Right.
him in, and again events unfold from there. Um, I think
So
it's a finely crafted story. It has fantastic writing. The graphics are amazing. The battle system is simple and deep at the same time. The music is really good,
really,
and I don't know. I'm trying to think of what else I can say
yeah,
about it, but
you've just been praising the game to death. I'll definitely have to pick it up, especially since I've been on this PlayStation Classic, modded Classic rut lately. So that would probably be a perfect game to have to play on there. But
if
yeah,
I had to give some flaws to it,
oh yeah, here we go. What do
I
we got?
would I would say the areas that you travel in the game can feel cramped, especially since your character doesn't really travel in a full circle or like analog. He travels
Hmm.
in 8 different directions, and you try to work that with a camera that you have to use L and R, and sometimes it's hard to see the character at an angle because you have like one terrain and it's like being shifted like that when you're in the map. So it can
So
be hard to see things,
it's
especially
kind of
when things are cramped.
it's kind of awkward.
Yeah, I mean the areas are beautifully designed. It's
Hmm.
just that can be troublesome, especially in the town. There's a part in the game that frustrates me even to this day. It's not too bad, but it is a tad bit frustrating.
Hmm.
Is there's a part in a very cramped town where you have to play hide and seek with kids, and you have to go out and find each kid, and you have to keep toggling the camera around in the town to find the right angle of where they're at. And it takes me a little while to find them each time.
So of the Breath of Fire games, though, like you feel that you said 3 and 4 are the best in the series for you?
Yeah, I think I will probably
Because it sounded
give.
like you were kind of partial towards 2 as well.
I think if I had to choose,
Hmm.
I would probably lean a little more towards 4 because it did remedy some issues that were in 3 for me. And
Like what?
pretty much like the some things in the battle system, um things are kind of more simplified. It's easier to find stuff that we consider missable before they expand on the master system. Um Breath of Fire
Interesting.
3, I think they were a little rough on the random encounters a lot.
That's one of the biggest criticisms I heard.
And 4 tones it down somewhat, but not to the
Yeah.
point where it's just like easy handing it to you. And I think the characters in 4 are a tad bit more developed and have a
Yeah.
little more dynamic impact to them.
That's one of the things I was curious about because that was kind of my criticism from the first 2 games. And I did see an improvement over from 1 to 2, but I just felt like the characters weren't as developed as I wanted. And it I don't know, it kind of turned me off a little bit. But when I see people talking about Breath of Fire, 4 and 3 in such glowing terms, it makes me want to jump in and check it out and see, hey, maybe I missed something because even great RPG series, they have like games that aren't going to appeal to you. I mean, even like a Final Fantasy, if you pick up the wrong one and that's the only one you played, or you picked up 2 bad ones, then you could be missing out on a lot of enjoyment. So I guess I owe it to myself and to give it a shot.
Yeah, I think it's like less than $10 on PSN. I think if you want to get a physical copy of it, you're going to be coughing up about 60 to $70. But if you just want to download PSN, put it on your Vita or PS3, one of the two, or even your little modded PS1 Classic,
Mm, that's the way
um,
to go. Yeah, that's an
yeah,
option.
then yeah, those are definitely the ways to go. I think if you play Breath of Fire 4, I think your opinion of the series will change.
Awesome. Well, you've definitely piqued my interest. I've seen, because I've been modding my classic and I've been just trying to create the ultimate RPG machine. I keep thinking like, man, I should get Breath of Fire 4 on there because like I know that's a classic. So I'll definitely check it out. Me this week, man, I've been working like crazy. I haven't gotten really any gaming in as much as I wanted to, anyways. I haven't finished Cosmic Star Heroine, and for some reason, I got it in my mind the other night that I was gonna, play some more of that on my Switch because I'm pretty close to the end. And I don't know, I was just tired. I passed out with my Switch in my bed. So I've been working a lot of hours this week, but I should be back on track this upcoming week to get into some games. I still want to finish the Suikoden series, or at least the first two, going through those again. But it's kind of one of those things where I feel like I'm just going to tap for a little bit, and then, I get bored of it. I'm going to jump onto something else that might come out. And, we got episode Arden coming out next week, or March 26th anyways. So I don't know. I'll see the reception for that. I might dive into that and see how I might, if this might turn the tide for 15 with me. I highly doubt it, but I'll wait to see. So that's of interest to me next week. Does that show any interest to you at all?
I mean, Arden was one of the characters I liked most.
Sure.
But
I feel like he's like overused. Like, he was really cool in the game initially, and then like almost every piece of DLC, he's been like the focus of it. Not the focus of it, but like the motivational aspect of it, and like every cool thing about 15. I mean, besides hanging out with your bros and taking pictures and stuff, is centered on Arden. It kind of feels like a broken record to me at this point, despite him still being a pretty cool character.
Just a shame. It's a great villain in a mediocre game.
Yeah. Looks like Matt. Well, you have a couple people on here, by the way. We have Matt, Lane, BioPhoenix. Matt says, also want to know if you're able to answer this question, since this is a Q&A maybe. But are you guys stoked for Daemon X Machina? And do you guys play mech games at all? No, I don't. But that doesn't mean I can't get into it. Do you play mech games, Eric?
I have played mech games. I just can't think of the.
I played like a Dynasty Warriors styled mech game, but I don't think that counts. And I don't think you want me to talk about that one because it wasn't very good. But
no, I will say, when I saw the first preview for Daemon X Machina, it did look interesting. I did like the music and the fast combat look it had. I didn't download the demo. I always intended to, but I kind of forgot about it. So maybe I'll try it out soon, and I'll talk about it if I do. But that is one I've not gotten to yet. Same with like Deltarune.
But not because I got turned off on it, because I felt like I should like keep streaming that game, because it's a very popular game amongst a lot of our listeners and viewers. But it's definitely been on the list for me to play. I think at least.
Sorry about that. For some reason, you got cut off from me. What did you say before?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I noticed you stopped talking for a moment, so I was trying to I was trying to entertain the crowd while messaging you on Discord. But I'm glad you came back. But let's see. I think it was Lane who said, "Cough, finish Trails in the Sky hat." Wink, wink. And I was just saying, like, yeah, like I actually liked what I played from it when I streamed it, and I played some more of it, and I actually kind of liked it. And I think part of it was because I was expecting not to like it, so my expectations were pretty low. But I could tell they spent a lot of time like developing the world, and I could see where if I really put a lot of time into it, it could be rewarding. And I felt like the music was great. I felt like I really enjoyed the artwork. It was long-winded. Even the introduction sequence, like, Jesus Christ, like they just kept talking. I get, like, if you're not in the mood for that, that could be off-putting. But I didn't mind it. From the time I was playing it, parts of it had to do with we were streaming, so I was talking with Hian and a couple other people. I think BioPhoenix was there, and Lane, so Joker, obviously. So it was a good time.
If you're looking, speaking of Hian, if you're looking for a reason to play Breath of Fire 4, he'll give you the reason.
Yeah.
He loves that game. I don't blame him. It's a great game.
See, Keon suggests some great games to me, and then sometimes we just have a difference of opinion. Like Shadow Hearts, the first one is one of my favorite RPGs, and I suggested that to him, and he said, it was okay. And I was like, it was okay. No, it's great. What are you talking about? Matt says, what about the Armored Core series? I played that as a kid, and I liked it as a kid, and then I tried to play it as an adult, and I just didn't like it as much for whatever reason. But Xenogears, yeah, I love that. Xenogears is great. Clearly a classic. Have you played any of those, Eric?
Oh yeah, I mean, I definitely.
I mean, I know you played
Xenogears.
Xenogears, but yeah,
Armored Core, I'm not too familiar.
that's not particularly great to me.
Yeah,
But
I think that, or I forgot which one, Front Mission or Armored Core. I think it's Armored Core. They came out with that spin-off game recently, Left Alive. Came out in March, that I mentioned before that I might buy, which I'm glad I didn't buy, because
yeah,
it's actually a if you look at the review scores, it's in the red, pretty in the red, and most people agree with that.
see, and that's the thing. Like these days, like I just feel like I'm more cautious when it comes to games because I just want to see like, okay, like what's the review score going to be? When I was a kid, like I used to go to the video game store and like I would just like look at the front cover, and if it was a cool cover and I had enough allowance money, I would just buy it and like take a chance. Or Blockbuster, I would just be like, oh look at this cover. This cover looks sick. I'm gonna rent this. And nowadays, I have less time. I have more money, but so I don't know what the issue is than when I was a kid, but. Uh, I don't know. Once I start seeing, 7.5, 7, some review scores 8, like I get cold feet. But
I mean, you're speaking
let's
to a guy that has a copy of Space Jam up there.
well, you are an unusual person, but that's why you're on this podcast. Uh let's check out some of these comments or some of these questions from Discord. So we're gonna try to cover all the comments, not all the comments in Discord, because that way we'd be up here all night. But from our podcast questions part of our Discord server, we're gonna try to hit some of these as our main topics. We're gonna try to hit them all. I think the only one that we're not probably gonna spend a lot of time on, or probably at all, this time is from Leon, who asked about the Final Fantasy VII remake, and he wanted us to talk about the original and the expanded universe and have in-depth expectations, do's and don'ts, touching all the sensitive subjects, music, gameplay, etc. We think that's we were talking off on the side. We think that's a great topic, and we are definitely going to do that at some point in the future. But I think that would probably be better suited as like just an entire podcast topic. I think because if that was like one topic in a podcast, I think we'd have like a 4-hour podcast. I mean, so
Mm-hmm.
maybe when we get a Final Fantasy VII trailer or something like that, that would be a good time. But so the first one that I saw was from King Joker, or Joker as we all know him. He said, I would like a discussion over how different the PS2 era JRPGs were from the PS1 or SNES era, and whether it is one of the more neglected or less appreciated period of JRPGs. I don't know if we've had this discussion, but we do have a resurgent interest in that kind of gameplay, especially with the remasters and remakes coming out that generation, with real underrated gems being discovered again. I have some comments or thoughts on this, but you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I look at the PS2 generation fondly. The kind of way I look at it is that I personally find the PS1 the pinnacle of JRPGs. Like, there's some beautiful RPGs on Super Nintendo, but like the everything just kept rising, like up with the PS1,
Mm-hmm.
and it got there to the top for me. I feel like the PS2 just stayed right there on the fine line with the PS1, like, because we got some fantastic RPGs on the PS2
Oh yeah.
that I think fondly of. Like, we got the Final Fantasy 10, 11, and 12 on there. We have Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne, the Persona 3 and 4 made it on
Mm-hmm.
there.
Yeah.
I mean, I can look at the back right here right now. The RPGs, we got the Castle game hack series.
Mm-hmm.
The what else is Star Ocean 3 came out, Xenosaga trilogy.
Yeah.
There's a ton of good ones over here, and I
You
mean,
got Rogue Galaxy, I mean Kingdom Hearts,
yeah, Kingdom Hearts definitely.
Shadow Hearts, you know.
Hmm.
A lot of great games.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that the PS2 raised the bar higher than the PS1, but I think for the most part, it stayed on that bar with the PS1, and a
Well,
lot of great JRPGs came up from it. I think the PS3 slash 360 is
mhm.
when it started going more downward. I mean, of course, we had some really good RPGs on the PS3 and 360, but the
Well, that was kind of the rise of like Western RPGs and popularity. I mean,
yeah,
not to say that they weren't popular beforehand, but we really started to see. I feel like JRPGs decline um, from the mainstream. I mean, and they've always had a place, but not like it used to.
well, the way I saw it is like JRPGs are starting to run out of fuel. So they were trying a lot of experimentation
Hmm.
in these games, and a lot of it fell flat because it was kind of like a trying too hard type of scenario,
Yeah.
and a lot of times it came and bit them back in the ass. I mean, we have games that like we were looking so forward to and got disappointed with like The Last Remnant, Infinite Undiscovery,
Hmm.
Enchanted Arms. I mean, all these like really big, great looking RPGs just turned out being disappointments. And that one, and it kind of just started killing off like my interest in JRPGs and more in Western RPGs. This kind of started like like around that time,
Hmm.
funny enough. And but I think with the PS4 slash Xbox One, like I think it's in a better place than it was with the PS3 and 360, but it's definitely not reached the height of the PS1 and PS2 era, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, when just looking at the PS1 and PS2 era RPGs, and I totally agree with what you said about the PS4. Like it's definitely like better than I think PS3, at least for JRPGs, but definitely not hit that classic era. But it's hard for me to pick either PS1 or PS2 era, just because like PS1 games, like Sony, like really forced a lot of companies to put out, or they really pushed hard for them to like develop like 3D technologies and such. And while like, you know, obviously we still had a lot of PS1 games that, you know, still had like the classic pixel art style or, you know, remain true to that SNES era style. If you look back, like a lot of games just are kind of graphically awkward today. Even Final Fantasy VII is a little graphically awkward. And a lot of PlayStation 1 games, a lot of times they didn't have a very good localization until later in the PlayStation's lifespan when you know, we got towards the PS2 coming out. So like we have some real classics at the same time. Like a lot of them, like I feel don't age as well as others. And you know, like I said, like there's issues with like the localization that didn't really get addressed until we got to the PS2 era. And I think that PS2 like really kind of polished out some of those issues, and the graphically, like obviously it's a superior system, but like I think the reason you see all these remasters from the PS2 era coming out is just because those games still look good when you remaster them. I mean, obviously it doesn't look like a PS4 game, but
Most of them do.
yeah, but yeah, most of them do. Anyways, you're always going to find one or two, or you know, a dozen that don't look as good as they could. But I mean, they really went forward in production value and still look really good when you remaster them. Now, the one thing that I think brings down the PS2 era RPGs over the PS1, and this is a problem that PS1 games had, but not as much because it wasn't as prevalent. But uh, you know, it seemed like with PS2 RPGs, like voice acting became a requirement. And a lot of times, like, I feel like games did not deserve to have voice acting. Like, the voice acting actually detracted from the experience on the PlayStation 2. And look, there was a lot of games on the PS1 where they put voice acting in there that it wasn't very good. But I mean, most RPGs on the PS1 did not have voice acting, whereas, you know, on the PS2, it was there, and a lot of times it was pretty cringe. And
Yeah, the PS1, it was really, I mean, it was hard enough to localize it, the
mhm,
games with the technology they had. Now PS2 did better, C to especially like throughout the internet technology. Localization on games is just fantastic on PS2 a lot of times. But the PS1 was still in the kind of primitive, like at the end of the primitive era of localization in games. So just imagine just trying to put voice acting on top of this awkward localization a lot of times,
Yeah.
where it doesn't sound awkward if you just like read it,
Hmm.
but if you had like a voice actor saying it or trying to say it, like even like Final Fantasy 7, as great as it is, does have those awkward localization quirks in there here and there. And
Yeah.
just trying to hear someone do a voice acting of that would be just like it would be so horrible.
Well, and the thing is, like, a lot of times it's just the way they did it. They didn't really have the resources or the infrastructure to record voice acting properly. And so you would have one voice actor record his parts or her parts, and then, 2 months later, somebody would come in and record their parts, and like they wouldn't really get to interact. And, one person would like really emphasize a line, and another person would just kind of respond real quick. And it just wasn't very good. BioPhoenix says Caldecca, I can't ever say it. Caldecca is probably one of the best voice works for a PS1 RPG. I agree and disagree. It's kind of like a prequel to Shadow Hearts. It's like the same world, but like you don't have to play that to play Shadow Hearts. But I agree and disagree, BioPhoenix. I feel like it's very hit or miss.
I think
Sometimes it's exceptional. Yeah.
I think we can all agree that Chaos Wars has the best voice acting ever in any video game.
Chaos Wars? Oh, absolutely.
Best. Oh, Nicole, what did you do?
I feel like a lot of PS1 games though with their voice acting, like it usually like would be like it sounded like they were just like recording into like a tin can or something. Like it was just like are you using like a PC mic to record this? Like it was just it wasn't very good either. So I don't know. But
How did they get away with getting their family members to voice this?
I think they were probably like, "Hey, read this piece of paper," and like they secretly recorded them without them knowing, or something. Because a lot of times, that's what you get.
Like they even have your main character from Shadow Hearts who like doesn't have that voice at all, and he's like, I totally can't feel my body right. It's like
Yeah, it's
what?
yeah, it is pretty awkward.
It is
Um,
delightfully awful.
the thing is, too, like once they started introducing like voice acting more so, and I think that you were kind of alluding to this, is like a lot of those localization issues, like they came to light, like things that would be like you could kind of ignore, like were actually awkward when spoken by someone. And I think you saw a lot of that in Final Fantasy X, for example. Like, while that I think that
Metal
game,
Gear Solid, best voice acting in PS1, hands down.
yeah, Metal Gear, yeah, absolutely, I would agree with that entirely. It's really really good. I was playing that the other day, and it's been a while since I played it, and I was impressed. I was like, oh man, like I forgot how good this is.
Yeah, man, they hit those emotional chords very very well.
Hmm. So let's review this question again. He said PS2 era JRPGs, PS1 or SNES era, and then he also mentions PS2. Um, oh man, like when you put them up against each other like that, I think I still have to go with the PlayStation 1, because I just feel like the PlayStation 1 like attracted so much creativity, because like this was like a console that like you were just allowed to do whatever you want basically. And like especially since it was using the disc format, like game developers didn't have to worry about making super long games. They could have really high quality music if they wanted. I mean, Codeka had like live instrumental music on it. Like people got really, really creative. And that's not to take away from the Super Nintendo, because clearly you just have some dynamite games on there. And like, I don't know, man. Like I would say that PS1, SNES, and PS2, like of all consoles, those are like my three favorite, probably for sure.
Mhm. Now, as someone whose favorite RPG is on the Super Nintendo, Chrono Trigger,
Yeah, that's true. Mine
um,
too.
I would still have to say that PS1 is probably the best generation for JRPGs. This was the time where Developers didn't have to deal with small cartridges anymore. They could tell the stories they wanted to tell in these expansive, um, through multiple discs in the game. They could tell this story, this huge world. They could make a 40 to 50 hour game
Yeah.
RPG as opposed to like
Hmm.
the usual 15 to 25-hour ones from the Super Nintendo. And while the Super Nintendo still made incredible RPGs with the limitations they had, and they use that limitation to the best of their abilities, I just feel like the PS1 was still just like the necessary step up from that, and it just knocked it right out of the park.
Well, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but like the fact that like Sony would basically let companies do whatever they wanted. I mean, Nintendo, like they really like were very, very restrictive with what companies could do and what kind of content they could have. And, when you like localize stuff, a lot of times they would like change a lot of things to like try to fit other cultures, which makes sense. But, like one of the biggest complaints you see a lot of times from SNES era games is like how much they changed. I mean, I know people complain about that with Earthbound, for example. People say they changed stuff with Final Fantasy IV. They changed stuff with Final Fantasy VI a little bit, even though that was a pretty dark game, I think. But, once you got onto the PlayStation, like Final Fantasy VII, that was the first Final Fantasy with like actual blood. Like they actually got to explore some like real themes there and not have to worry about like trying to like make it like it could be perceived one way but it could be perceived another. Did she try to commit suicide or did she just jump? That like it was like no, they could just be like they could just address serious topics. So for me that's kind of like why I would put the PlayStation above the Super Nintendo. But at the same time, like if you go back to like a remastered standpoint, I guess if you're gonna like reboot games or like bring them to modern audiences, I just love pixel art. So like, and I think pixel art still ages like way better than PlayStation One games.
Now,
Usually.
PlayStation 1 pixel art games age
Oh yeah,
very
that's true.
well also.
That's
Like
true.
Breath of Fire 4 and 3.
Yeah. I don't know. I know. I'm gonna get on it. But
You know what I recommend is good.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Haven't steered me wrong yet.
I
All
sure.
right. All right, let's see. What else do we got on here? He says, we already answered that one. From Second Entity, has there ever been an RPG that you guys really liked that had one thing about it that kind of ruined the overall experience? Alternatively, have you ever played a mediocre RPG that you thought could have been great with a few changes? Hmm.
Mhm. Mm, I mean, there's always some one little thing I can point out in almost everything I've played. Like, if I want to go back to Breath of Fire again,
Hmm.
Breath of Fire 3 has one of the most awful things I have ever played in an RPG. And while it what it works in the intent, I just hated doing it. There is this part near the end of the game where you have to travel a vast desert, and and it takes a really long time to do. This is not like some small mini game. This is something that takes like if you don't know exactly what you're doing, it could potentially take you a few hours to do it, and you
Hmm.
have to keep traveling through a desert while you're behind your character's back and you're traveling a map while like going in these like certain directions, north, south, and east and west. And you can get lost, but you can find like special items in it. Um, and it was just so frustrating. If you do not have a strategy guide with it, like it will take you a long time to get through it. And not only that, you have to keep an eye on your water or like and make sure that you keep yourself hydrated while doing it. This is something that almost made me put the game down.
Yeah.
Like it was just I just hated it. Like someone can come to me right now and say, "Oh, it's not that bad." It's like, but like at the time I played it, like when going through that, like I was banging my head on my table. It's like I could not stand it anymore. Breath of Fire 4 kind of has one. It's nowhere near as bad.
Hmm.
But like there's a point in Breath of Fire 4 where you have to find um a certain person in a Great Plain while you're on this weird horse-like creature, and you have to follow the directions of the birds to find her. And that one isn't bad. That one takes like 15-20 minutes.
Yeah.
But this in Breath of Fire 3 was almost a uh like a game killer for me. I hated it that much.
Yeah. Like, and I can totally understand that. It's hard for me to say like for certainty that like one single thing like killed a game, but I would have to say that probably like the draw system in Final Fantasy, or not the draw system, but the fact that drawing was a contributing factor, but the scaling factor of enemies in Final Fantasy VIII, like I really did not like that. Typically, I like to grind a little bit. I like to collect a lot of money. I like to overpower bosses. And the fact that like I felt like when I got into a random encounter that this was actually making the game more difficult because I would fight the battle. It really rubbed me the wrong way. That like I didn't feel like it just felt frustrating to me. And I realized it was trying to force you to play one way, but that game ended up being kind of broken anyways. So the way it was trying to force you to play, like if you thought about it, you could really break the game. Not easily, it would still take some effort, but it. I just wish they had not have had done that. And if they ever did remake that game, if they had an option to not have enemy scaling, I think that would be um, a really really good feature for me. I think like other games, Xenoblade Chronicles. Uh, Again, like it didn't break the game for me, but it came close with the amount of inventory management that I had to do. Like it was ridiculous because some nights I would come home from work or whatever, and I'd have like an hour to play the game before after eating and doing whatever else I have to do. It's not a weekend, it's a weeknight. And like the only thing I would do for that hour that night is like go through my equipment, like, is this better than this? What, oh, is this better than this? And then like sell it and then buy stuff and then sell it. Like, and it would like, after I was done, I'd have like 10 minutes left to actually play the game, which I would just be like, why, like, where am I going to go? I'm just going to save and then, end it right there. But I think that game ended up having a lot of really positive aspects that really won it over for me. But for a while, it was a really, really hard battle.
I tell you, I might be a little bit of an unpopular opinion on this one, but something I really don't like in RPGs in particular is when they do like a forced like side mini game thing with you, in terms of like it's also a core thing that you always have to go back to once in a while.
Hmm.
Two things I can think of: one with Ni no Kuni 2,
Mm.
where you have to go back and rebuild your kingdom and stuff while you're going out on your adventure.
Yeah.
You have to do skirmishes and such with them. I don't like things that detract yourself so much from the game
Hmm.
that it kind of takes you out of it. But Final Fantasy Type Zero did this also with its type of skirmish deal with that wasn't like too much part of the game. Like I hated doing those. And as much as I love Skies of Arcadia,
Hmm.
that game, I was not a big fan of the airship portions of
Yeah.
the game. Like I wanted to, like every time those came up, I'm like, all right, let's get this over with so I can get back to the main game. And I know I'm going to be very unpopular on that opinion, but I hate it when they do things that detract me so much from
Well,
the core of the game.
that's how I felt with like the gummy ship portion of Kingdom Hearts 3. Like it was such night and day. I was like, just let me play what I want to play. I don't want to do this. Like, stop forcing me to do this. Driving this crappy ship. I don't want to learn the mechanics. I just want to get to the freaking world. But I recognize, what I might hate, other people might love, and that's the thing with this is, even I brought up FFA. Like a lot of people really like the enemy scaling. They think that's a great feature. So it is one of those things.
Like,
Sorry to cut you off there.
like even though I can go to my favorite series, Zelda,
Hmm.
um, like Phantom Hourglass,
Yeah.
I hated going back to the Temple of the Ocean King. Like every single time that you got an artifact from a dungeon, you could go deeper into that dungeon to get the next
Hmm.
thing you need to go out to the next dungeon. Then
Yeah,
every
lots
time you
of
had to go in there and you had to sneak and use the pots and everything, while not particularly hard, it was
mhm,
annoying and frustrating that I had to keep doing that every time. Like,
yeah.
this is not something that's Zelda friendly.
Yeah. Um, I'm trying to think of other examples, and I think one thing that is almost always a red flag for me, and I really have to force my way through the game to like give it a chance. But this is something that I believe, if I remember correctly, Secret of Mana does, and it turned me off. But I hate when RPGs like will let you buy stuff at a shop, but it won't tell you if the item's better than what you currently have equipped.
Oh, I hate that.
And I have to like buy it and then find out, oh no, it's actually worse than what I have. And like, then they'll give me like half the amount of gold beforehand, and I got to like save and reload. And it's just, dude, don't do that to me.
The early Fantasy Star games are
Oh
so
yeah,
guilty of this.
yeah.
I'm glad on the Sega Ages version of uh, Fantasy Star 1, it actually had while in game didn't tell you, you
Hmm.
could pull up a weapon list through the UI of the game,
Hmm.
and you could check and see which weapon was better than another.
See, and I just feel like that makes sense because like you could like if we're recreating like reality here, and I went to go buy something, like I could generally do that from assessing the item at the store. Like don't make me buy something and then like sell it for like half the amount of gold. Um, so I mean, yeah, like just crappy game mechanics or something that like really gets to me. I mean, Final Fantasy 1, like when you know have your characters all attack the same enemy. If the enemy dies, to have the remainder of your party attack thin air. I didn't like that. You know, that type of stuff gets on me too. So,
I think it's a little hard for me to answer the other part of the question, which was what do you find good within a mediocre game?
mm.
Uh,
Well,
that's something
okay,
I need to
no,
more think about. I
yeah,
can't really think on top of my head.
I think, well, actually, what he said was a little bit different. Maybe you'll still have the same response, but it said, alternatively, have you ever played a mediocre RPG that you thought could have been great with a few changes? Um,
Oh, I mean,
I don't. Mediocre is a strong word, but you know, I think Final Fantasy 12, if they like had just, I don't know, focused on the story a little bit more, I think that would have been exceptional. Um, but I mean, I don't think that game was mediocre either. Uh, let's see here.
I mean, Final Fantasy 13, if they cut down the amount of traveling you have to do in the dungeon, especially the one when you get the pulse, it would have gameplay wise, it would have been more tolerable.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to think. I mean, honestly, I brought up Secret of Mana before, and like that game, if they would have just corrected the issue where I could just buy stuff and know like if it improved my you know equipment, if they got rid of that crappy UI where you like press a button and it goes into this like circle thing, and then like out of it, that's like I know they're trying to be creative, but like I just thought it was like very annoying to use. And then the dungeons, if they like wouldn't have such narrow hallways where like my character would just get constantly stunned over and over again, and like I would end up getting a game over because I couldn't even do anything from like full health. I think if they just paid attention in the like kind of those areas, I would have had much more enjoyable experience.
I mean, I can think of Final Fantasy 11, which is a great game, but the one thing it needed so badly, which they held against you so much, was a mini map.
Mm,
That is a game that desperately needed some form of mini map. Now, modders put in a mini map,
yeah.
but you even to get maps of areas in the game,
Hmm.
you had to do certain quests, and those quests were a complete pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Granted, this is an MMO from the early 2000s, so everything has to be a pain in the ass by default. But if that game had a mini map, it would have solved so many issues of traversing that game.
Yeah, and it's funny, like when we like look back on like a lot of stuff that we're talking about, a lot of it is just quality of life features that really turn us away, it seems. I mean, we brought up the map, you know, like shops and like their systems, the battle system itself. Like a lot of times, it's just it seems like the interface that you're interacting with, it's not as much of an issue with dialogue or the characters or the story as much. Although I'm sure I can think of plenty of examples where I would have criticism there, but a lot of times it's just the core game experience that could have been focused on a little bit better.
You know, Fable 3 would have actually been a pretty good game if they completely cut out the part where you become king and have to manage the people, or like for the big blight thing that's coming. They should have
Which,
just expanded on the story of you fighting up against your brother, who was the tyrannical king, and then you find out
yeah.
a twist, and then
Hmm.
you continue your journey from there. Like your journey kind of just stops from there when you become king, and that's the part of the game that no one likes in that game. If they just took that out entirely and just expanded on the story where it was going, then it would have been a much better game.
Was I'm trying to remember because it's been a while, but was it the third one that had the menu or equipment system where you would have to like go inside like a room and like go find the item to put it on? You couldn't just select it from a menu.
I don't remember. Maybe
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
haven't played Fable 3 since it first came out, so I can't.
Yeah, I just remember that being a ridiculous experience.
Fable 2 is
Um,
a great
yeah, very very good.
game.
So yeah, there's lots of things you can do though. I mean, even Final Fantasy VIII. Honestly, if they got rid of that orphanage scene, like I think that would have made. I don't know if that would have been like the turning tide, but that would have been a huge improvement. I think.
If they took away monster level scaling, also that would have been
Yeah.
good. Also,
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
leveling system's kind of pointless when when
You're
enemies
not
kind of level with you.
you're not being rewarded. You're being punished for doing the battle. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe, but the one thing to it is the junction system gets stronger and such too. The junction system is actually what makes your characters more than the levels.
Yeah. So, anyways, BioPhoenix says, yeah, Fable 3 was like that with the pause menu, and yeah, it was a mess. Yeah, I thought it was Fable 3. Thank you, BioPhoenix. Let's see here. We got some more here. Lane says, what are your favorite aspects of Western RPGs and your favorite aspects of JRPGs? What aspects would you like JRPGs to incorporate from Western RPGs and vice versa? That's a good question.
I don't know because a lot of times the JRPGs and WRPGs take a different approach. Like when you ask like what the parts of WRPGs are like, it's usually more of player choice that
Hmm.
I enjoy in those type of games, and usually they have pretty like nice enough. A lot of times, pretty good open worlds. Like Witcher 3 has a really amazing open world I like to explore, and usually they do a really good job making open world aspects and making that world feel alive. That's what I like more in WRPGs. When JRPGs kind of when they try to replicate that, like with Final Fantasy 15 and Xenoblade Chronicles X,
Just empty. Yeah.
like they really fall face flat in it, and that's because the biggest difference between WRPGs and JRPGs a lot of times tried to um, make it like it's your adventure. You
Hmm.
choose how you want to do that adventure, and like you choose what you want to do here and there. Now, JRPGs to an extent do give you some choice, like the good ones, like a lot like Chrono Trigger. But ultimately, what they want to do is tell you a story. And if they give you too much choice, then that story starts getting a little too open ended. It's getting stale, or um, it's getting too hard to write a solid story.
Hmm.
Like Final Fantasy VII, you do have like some choices that alter the scene some, but it doesn't affect how the game story runs ultimately.
Yeah.
It's still running in a linear direction. It's still
I
going
mean,
out set to
your
tell you a story.
yeah, your choices will make like small, like little, like scene changes, but it's not going to affect the main plot. So yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's the difference, and that's why I try to not say one's better than the other, because a lot of times Western RPGs are trying to do their own thing, and JRPGs are trying to do their own thing. So, and actually, I find it not so great when one company tries to do one from the other and trying to incorporate their type of deal
Hmm.
to it. The JRPG side is more guilt. Like I mentioned with 15 and Xenoblade Chronicles X and those type of games, I just don't think they understand how a rich open world works.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like that's just something that Western games are just better at doing, and it's very strange too. Like when you bring up 15, for example, because you would think that making an open world game is all about world building, right? That's something that you see the Elder Scrolls games do very well. You saw a lot of the earlier Fallout games do really well. They're like really building this world that people could get absorbed into, and that's also something that Final Fantasy games do, right? They have very believable worlds that they build, and so it's kind of perplexing. Like you would think that like that would kind of mesh a little bit better, but it just didn't. So yeah, I totally agree with that. But
To simplify it, I would say JRPGs want to tell you a story, and WRPGs want you to create this.
mm, yeah, well, I think another way to look at it too is, and this is something that I wish JRPGs could get from Western RPGs is, uh, I just feel like Western RPGs tend to have greater variety in their storytelling, right? And that's probably comes from that player choice. But when you get a JRPG, like it's like a cliche at this point, like it's going to be a coming of age story, right? You're going to have a main character that's like 19 and they're going to become an adult over this process. And like, it's like, okay, like how we get to that point may change, but it's very, very similar. You're going to have a very similar cast of characters. And it's like, back in like the 90s and early 2000s and even before in the early 90s, like JRPGs, like they used to be bold, like they used to take chances, and like you still have that like from occasionally now, but it seems all too often it's just like rehashing something I've already played before. And obviously we've seen countless Western RPGs that feel like it's like a Skyrim knockoff because it's trying to be a cash grab, but like it's just like from a story perspective, I feel like Western RPGs tend to be a little more interesting. Like I'm more often to see it and be like, huh, like that looks interesting. I wonder what will actually happen, and like I don't necessarily get that same thing from JRPGs. They tend to be more of like a callback to a better time than they are like actually making me like think about something new. Obviously, you're seeing this a little bit different with indie RPGs, but that's almost like a total different genre now than JRPGs, because a lot of these game developers aren't even like in Japan or anything. They're just fans of that era. But I do wish that they would go back to taking chances with their story and try something new.
Yeah, it's the thing with between that's made me like WRPGs more with JRPGs a little less nowadays is there's a lot of what we call otaku pandering in JRPGs. So they
Yeah.
feel that a lot of times maybe developers feel like that these tropes are needed. Like you need the teenage hero, you need the spunky young teenage girl type of trope, and you like need these tropes in here, so they kind of just meet the checklist type of deal. I'm not calling any particular game out on this, but there have been JRPGs recently in the past few years that have gotten worse and worse with this.
Hmm.
And I mean, I guess there's your audience for it, but I'm really hoping that like the companies that truly count, like like with Final Fantasy and such like that, like like just try to make a good story and try to not go overboard on the pandering.
See, and that's one area where I was really excited for when I was seeing some about Octopath Traveler, because it seemed like it was going to be not quite that way. It would be more of a like a just a story, like a good story. and like the characters were mature, and like it wasn't going to be like, well, we have to have a kid character, and we have to have, we have to have this because we saw this worked in this game. Like it seemed like it was going to go that route, and like it's almost like I would have rather have done the stereotypical thing with that game because it ended up not really having a story at all. So
We seriously need Matsuno back making games. The
dude, yeah,
like Tactics and Vagrant Story.
absolutely.
He has an interesting way of using like Western ideas, but still making. He's still making a JRPG or like strategy type games and a JRPG game, but he's using like Western ideas, Western writing, the type of art style akin kind of to like something that may appeal more to Western fans than Japanese. And then you got creators like the Dark Souls series.
Mm,
Those are made in Japan, but they have a very Western feeling ideology to them. So there's definitely exceptions to the rule
absolutely, yeah.
of that. It's just a lot of times Japan uh, doesn't get it right when they try to bring the West over to them.
Well, and that might be this might be a cultural thing, or maybe it's just me being ignorant. But when I look at things like Dragon Quest, for example, it seems like people really like their traditions, right? They like what they like, and they don't want change as much as we do over here, where we really like the novelty, and like we want to see something new. We don't want to see what happened 10 years ago. That's old. Like we want the freshest and newest thing. And maybe I'm just reading into it more than I should, but I'm just curious to see if maybe that has some resonance with people that live over there.
Well, the great thing about Dragon Quest is it always finds a way to modernize itself without compromising
Hmm.
what fans of the series love about it.
Yeah.
It's an ideology that I wanted Final Fantasy to stick with, but apparently they have a hard time being consistent with that.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a little off topic.
No, I totally get you.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know. I mean, that's like that is. I see that come up sometimes on like Discord servers and stuff and online, and like it's kind of interesting to compare, like like how drastic these two different uh, ways of telling a story can be. Because even when we have seen player choice, like you mentioned with Western RPGs, when it's implemented in JRPGs, it's usually just not at the same scale. And it's kind of interesting that my favorite JRPG is Chrono Trigger, and I think one of my favorite parts about Chrono Trigger is the way it uses player choice and lets you change the way the game unfolds. And even early on in the game, like the way you react to certain events comes into play later, and it doesn't really change the story necessarily, but it is kind of like a fun poke at what you would normally do in RPGs, right? When you're running around the fair and you're like taking everybody's stuff, and like the game calls you out on it, and then later in the game, it implements New Game Plus, and you can replay the game over and get different endings, and save characters, and like really make the game your own, and and that's a JRPG, but that type of stuff is usually found in Western games, so.
I do
It's
like
interesting.
when RPGs do that, where you can kind of like choose what you
Mm.
want to do within it. You still have ultimately have a path you have to follow,
Yeah,
but
that's
you
true.
do like small little things that changes things up a bit
Hmm.
on the way there. I think that's a pretty nice balance.
Yeah, and you're yeah, for sure.
I think if you have if either side wants to take inspiration from another, they really need to do their study and figure out why that works before they try to implement it into um a genre that may not call for it. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I think I would leave that up to geniuses to figure out how to mix those together. But a lot
Well,
of times when you try to take the linear nature of JRPGs into Western RPGs, and maybe a little unappealing. Same thing with Western RPG into JRPG. When you try to put like a linear story like 15s in a open world, like the only thing that's suffering is the open world for it, and it just becomes a chore and a bother to get through it.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And like I feel like I've been hating on JRPGs, even though like we cover a lot of JRPGs, but I do think that like Western games can learn a lot from JRPGs as well, because I just usually not all the time, but usually I just feel that JRPGs are better at having a more interesting cast of characters. Like I actually feel more attached to them generally. I'm actually interested in like their backstories and such. Whereas, usually with Western games, there's so much concentration on defining your own story that there's so many branching narratives that I don't quite feel as close to characters in the game as I would in a JRPG. So, I mean, maybe in terms of like character development, I think Western RPGs could take a nod from JRPGs. Obviously, there's plenty of games, Western games, where there's fantastic character development. I mean, you see this in Witcher 3, for example. Like those that story is so compelling, but it's not commonplace, I find, to be that strong. So,
Mm-hmm.
let's see here. We also have some YouTube comments. Let's go ahead and knock those out. This question, I think, Eric, is going to apply more to you because this is your domain. But we have from Suarez Cipher. I know he said previously in a previous comment that he was kind of taking a break from our podcast because he was trying to finish Kingdom Hearts, and he finally did, and he went over and kind of gave his thoughts on Kingdom Hearts. But this is a separate question that he's now bringing up. He says, a question for you, but first some background. Smash Brothers has expanded over time from celebrating only Nintendo characters. The characters from Konami, Sega, Namco, Capcom, Platinum Games, Square, Next Up, Atlas, and I suppose Xenoblade characters can count as Nintendo, since Nintendo published and Nintendo has owned a controlling interest in Monolith Soft since then, and the Donkey Kong Country characters probably count as Nintendo since they published and Nintendo owns the Donkey Kong universe. And Dark Samus is just the Donkey Kong situation. For the playable characters, at least, I think they're stuck to characters owned by Japanese game developers. What's one of the biggest events in Japanese gaming? Dragon Quest release days. Let me see if I read that right. What's one of the biggest events in Japanese gaming? Dragon Quest release days. Wouldn't it be fitting if one of the remaining 4 Smash Brothers Ultimate DLC characters put Enix on the list with the Dragon Quest character? Which Dragon Quest character would be the best one to put in Smash? Are there any other Japanese game companies not already on the list who could contribute a good character? I'm already thinking of somebody, but go ahead.
Well, funny you say that because there were rumors, and I think Nintendo actually recently removed the folders to get rid of the leak in one of the Smash Bros. Updates, but there were strong, heavy hints that Erdrick from Dragon Quest III was going to be in Smash Bros. So your wish may actually come true. And if I did have to pick a Dragon Quest character, it would certainly have to be Erdrick because he or she decide whichever one you decide to be in the game, and I'm sure Smash Bros will let you be the male or female counterpart, similar to like how Robin and Corrin work in the game. But Erdrick is the pretty much the representation of the Dragon Quest series as a whole. Like when you if they have like a Dragon Quest cereal, Erdrick's gonna be on the front of the box.
See, I almost wonder if they would go. Obviously, I haven't been paying attention to the rumors, so I'm probably just conjecture here. But I almost wonder if it would be better if they just went more modern with something from Dragon Quest XI, like somebody like Rab or Jade or something like that. I think Rab would be a really cool character because he's just a quirky guy. Like I think like it'd be like an interesting way to do that, and he actually has a personality and stuff. But
yeah, but he's not iconic enough.
I guess yeah.
Dragon Quest.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Dragon Quest III is to what people look at with Final Fantasy VII. Like Cloud is the most representative or like the most popular character to represent the Final Fantasy franchise, without a doubt.
I guess I see what you're saying. Like you're looking at it from like what would appeal to Dragon Quest fans and Smash Brothers, and I was looking at it like, well, what would be a good marketing strategy? And usually that's not the way they go. They'll just pick the most popular character.
Erdrick is. I mean, Dragon Quest is so powerful that just having Erdrick in Smash Bros. Will get people out to go buy Smash Bros. In Japan. Like he like Dragon Quest, especially 3, Dragon Quest 3
Dragon
is
Quest
just
3
like,
was pretty beastly of a game.
yeah, it is a iconic game in Japan. That is like the game. And Air Drake is a powerful influence culturally also, in the gaming world there. So I have no doubt that if a Dragon Quest character makes it to Smash Bros, it is most definitely Air.
I could agree with that. I definitely see where you're coming from. He also says, are there any other Japanese game companies not already on the list who could contribute a good character? I've heard rumors of some Persona characters showing up.
Yeah, I mean Joker for Atlas. That's one. What other Japanese gaming companies are there? Uh, maybe I can consult the all-knowing one here.
I'm trying to like. I feel like every time I think of one, like they've already. Like I can think of other games where it might be interesting, but like when you think of the company itself, right? So even like like the biggest one, Square Enix, there's all sorts of games like they could pull characters from. I mean, it would be cool if Ashley from A Vagrant Story appeared. Like that might be kind of interesting, but obviously it's not very iconic, but it is a kind of a cult classic.
Okay,
but companies themselves, yeah.
Koei Tecmo, they could use even though there's Ryu from Street Fighter, they could use Ryu Hayabusa from Ninja Gaiden. Ninja Gaiden was a popular game on the Nintendo, and they could just call him like Hayabusa or something like that.
I was looking at it from an RPG perspective, but now that you've totally like blown my mind, I was like, oh yeah, like there's other genres here we can pull from.
Let's see here. There is.
Let's see what's in the comments.
Level 5, Hudson Soft, System Works. I think they have almost all their ground covered.
Well, I mean, how many characters were in this last release? Something crazy.
Enough.
A lot. Yeah. And so, but anyways, it's an interesting question for sure.
I mean, there's Falcom, but Falcom's a little too niche.
Yeah. Well, sometimes they do stuff that like people don't expect, and like that's why like a game has gotten more notoriety, right? Isn't that one of the reasons why Earthbound hit the spotlight again? Because they brought some of those characters over.
Ness has been around since the N64 one.
Well, that's what I'm saying, but like prior to that, like it wasn't as big as it was after that. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, Smash Bros has a pretty big influence. Like we got Fire Emblem over in the West just because Marth and Roy were really popular characters in Smash Melee. And then we got the Fire Emblem for the Game Boy Advance and GameCube, and the series like started building up momentum in the West from there.
Yeah. Let's see here. We also have from Cody Murley. He says this will be the last comment we have here. He says, great stories about first RPGs really took me back. My first RPG, if counting ARPGs, was Zelda 2. I have an old photo of me playing it while sitting on a training toilet. Yes, as in playing games before being potty trained. That's serious commitment there. I like it. He says, after that, it was Breath of Fire at age 6. And that was a pretty tough entry into the genre. That's crazy. I'm surprised you could read everything in that game. He goes on to say the abbreviations of text in that game. Oh, that's what he's saying. The abbreviations of text in that game to a 6-year-old brain were near insurmountable, and I couldn't beat the first boss until I was older. At any rate, this is all a long-winded way of saying that Capcom and all its rising glory needs to continue reviving its franchises with a new Breath of Fire entry. Still one of my favorite series of all time, excluding 5. What do you think, Eric?
I think you should play Breath of Fire 4.
Oh, to me? Okay.
People are backing me up.
I'll play it. I mean, I didn't even expect him to be commenting on Breath of Fire. Like, I only read the first sentence or two before we started this podcast. So
I tell you, Capcom's on everyone's mind right now.
I'll have to check it out. How would you feel about bringing a new Breath of Fire entry?
Oh, 100%. I really hope they make a Breath of Fire 7 and not make it like 5 or 6.
See, what's the deal with 5 and 6? Like, why don't you like 5 and 6?
First off, 5 has a horrible story, and it
Okay.
has a god awful mechanic where if you overuse like your dragon form
Mm-hmm.
in the game,
Yeah.
not only do you get a game over, but you have to start the game from the very beginning.
This is Breath of Fire 5.
Yep, Dragon Quarter. That is an awful mechanic. Now, granted, you keep a lot of your stats and
Mm-hmm.
stuff when you go back to the beginning of the game, and they kind of try to entice you to go back a few times to build up your characters and go through that, which I don't agree with either. And Breath of Fire 6, we never even got over here. It was a mobile game over in Japan,
Hmm.
and it doesn't look like Breath of Fire at all.
Yeah.
So I really hope if they make it, they go back to what worked really well in 3 and 4 and improve upon that and make it even better.
I feel like people always say that, like, hey, just go back to what worked and like stick to the formula. Stop trying to like reinvent yourself. But I feel like like somewhere in the marketing team and like they start getting in there and they say, well, you can do that, but like, like let's look at what's trending right now. Let's look at what people are talking about. You should make it more Persona. Persona 5 is a really big JRPG right now in the West. Why don't you make it more like that? Or and I'm just guessing here, like they could go any route, but it's just interesting that very rarely do companies actually do that.
Yeah, well, we got Devil May Cry 5 right now. That was basically let's take Devil May Cry 3 and 4 and make it better. And that's what Devil May Cry 5 is, and people are raving that's like one of the greatest action games that come out in recent.
Recent history. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sometimes like game series though they'll kind of reinvent themselves also, and like it turns out being really really good. I mean, we got Final Fantasy 7, and that was great. Most recently, God of War. Like they really, I mean, it's still the same concept, but like they went a new direction with it, and it ended up being really really good. It's always a gamble, I guess, when you try to do something new, but I guess in Breath of Fire 5's sake, maybe not new, but just poorly implemented. People are gonna hate that for all of eternity. So it is definitely a gamble.
Mm-hmm. But and I don't always necessarily mean just do the same exact thing. It's more like saying find out what worked, what people really liked in those previous games, and improve upon it, modernize it more.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to like completely change the systems and put arbitrary stuff in to try to make it different. You don't need to make it completely different. You just do what you can to make it feel better.
Hmm.
Is the best way to put it. Like when I imagine like Breath of Fire 7, I want to take Breath of Fire 4, make beautiful character sprite artwork, make it more expansive enough maps and better character control. Um, and that's mostly what I want from a new game in the series. It doesn't have to be some big AAA production
Yeah.
type game. I would like it if it was just like a handheld game. If they decided to do that, I'd be all for that. I think that's a series that just really needs to come back.
Well, hey man.
Same with Mega Man Legends. That they need to bring back.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool too.
I think if
Well,
they're in the crowd pleasing mood right now, I think that's a game that's necessary to come back. They canceled it on the 3DS and pissed off a lot of people, and people even made like a big movement towards it.
mhm.
So Capcom should be like, okay, let's bring this game back. Let's put it on the Switch.
Let's make
Call it a
people
day.
happy. Yeah, that's what we're in the
Mhm.
business of selling stuff. Why don't you why don't you just do what people want? Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know. Like I feel like the fact that like we've seen so many crazy announcements this year, and just like the fact that like this just seems the time to like remake games. We saw that we're seeing this with the Zelda remake. We saw this with Pokemon, Final Fantasy 7 remake, and then but also like we're revisiting series that you haven't seen in a long time. Like this would be the opportune time, the most ideal time to do that. I mean, who knows how long this is going to last until some new trend comes on, and people aren't really as interested as they are now in revisiting the past or being as nostalgic as they are. So yeah, I think right now is the perfect time.
Yeah, I agree. It's not only does it like bring the nostalgia in for people who have been fans of the series for a long time, like Devil May Cry 5 again, for example. Not only did it bring in veterans of the series
Mm,
who love that type of game, it also successfully brought in newcomers
yeah.
because you don't need to play the previous 4 games to enjoy this, and you see everyone loving and raving about it. The
Mm,
word of mouth naturally gets other people interested, and they want to just play a good action game. So it's a best of both worlds type of deal. The Breath of Fire 7 comes out, like it can still be its own thing. You don't need to play like
dude,
I'm
we're
just
good.
speaking ideally. You
Yeah.
don't need to play the previous games. Like
Mhm.
it's just a good RPG.
I'm sure though, it seems like a no brainer to me. Like I'm not like like I just feel like that has to happen. Like I don't know why you wouldn't do that. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Capcom is definitely in the crowd pleasing mood, like I said before.
Sure.
So we'll see what comes from it. I mean, they've been hitting hit after hit right now with Resident Evil 7, Mega Man 11, the RE2 remake, Devil May Cry 5, like
Hmm.
all hits.
Yeah. So
So let's just see how far they can keep going.
yeah, for sure. But I think that about wraps this up. We've blown through the remaining Discord questions that we had. Uh, we do have one more from Leon, but like we said, like in the beginning of this podcast, his question is too awesome to devote just a tiny portion of time to. We feel like it would be a more in-depth conversation, maybe for like a full-length podcast, but we're definitely going to get to that. But again, if you're listening to this on iTunes or on your phone or whatever, we do have a YouTube page. Just click on the link in the description, and you'll go right to our YouTube page. Subscribe there. Let us know that you enjoy it, and there'll be a link also to join our Discord so that you can go on there, click on podcast questions, type in your question, and we'll try to bring it up in the next podcast or in as soon as we can. Also, if you comment in the description of the YouTube video, we'll of course bring that up as well. But I think that about wraps us up for this week. Eric, do you have any final thoughts besides telling me to play Breath of Fire 4?
Mm, play it right now. But seriously, hopefully more RPG related news comes out next week. It was a bit of more of a dry spell, but it did give us an opportunity to finally get all of the questions that you all had. So it was a blessing in disguise that not much news came out this week. But hopefully, since we're dried up on comments, also some RPG news will come up. Maybe they'll finally announce FF7R this week. That would be convenient.
We
It
were
won't happen, but it'll be convenient.
we were almost about to talk about Octopath Traveler again on the phone because they came out with a little bit more information, but like I was like, all right, let's talk about it. And then Eric was just like, after he suggested the article, he was like, we can't talk about this. I looked at it and like all they talked about was like character names, and I was like, yeah, we can't do this. So yeah, hopefully we have some news and some other stuff come out next week. But please leave us some questions, some topic ideas. That way, if something crazy happens, we'll have something to talk about next week. So, anyways, thank you again for checking us out, and we'll be sure to catch you all next week. Thank you, guys.
Sure.